Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's Monday, and that means it's time for another retro movie review. I'm not sure about how I actually feel about the film we're going to talk about today, the 1982 epic Fitzcarraldo. Never heard of it? That's okay. It is not a common go-to on streaming platforms. Many critics have it on their top 1,000 movies to see before you die lists. Me, I appreciate it as a work of art, a film written and produced by Werner Herzog and coming at the tail end of the new German cinema movement, which gave promising young German directors who made well-received low-budget art house films more well-financed opportunities to make bigger films. And when I watch it, I know what people see as the art of cinema within it. The cinematography, the attention to the physical movement of the actors paired with their lines and emotions. I get it. It is one of the most troubled productions of any movie ever, and it took 5 years to make. Still, I would only recommend it to those of you that are curious about it. If you are looking for something that will juice you up, give you some action, a thrill, then this is not the movie for you. Clocking in at just over 2.5 hours, Fitzcarraldo spends the first hour or so focused on opera and the financing of a riverboat to move downstream into the Amazon rainforest of southern Peru. This is not gripping stuff, but it is German cinema of the late 70s at its best. However, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. First things first, you have to know that Fitzcarraldo is based on a true story. Carlos Fitzcarraldo was a rubber baron in 1890. He needed to get from one river to another, and the easiest way to do that at the time was to cross over an isthmus, the small portion of land that separated the two bodies of water. He had the indigenous peoples of the area clear out the rainforest for this 1 to 2 mile tract of land. Then they disassembled the boat, which only weighed 30 tons, moved it up a 20-degree slope and down to the other side where it was reassembled back in the water. Sound like an interesting little anecdote? Sure, I thought so too. Sound like the genesis for a 210-minute cinematic epic? Yeah, I didn't think so either. But Herzog saw the potential. He wrote the script in which Fitzcarraldo is a fanatic of opera, obsessively so. He is broke and wants to try to make money as a rubber baron. He lives in Iquitos, Peru, where his previous business adventures failed. 1890 was the height of colonialism and exploitation of Central and South America, and the film takes this to task in many ways. However, none of this matters. What matters is Fitzcarraldo's real motivation. He wants to make enough money to build an opera house in the middle of the Peruvian rainforest so he can invite his favorite opera singers to perform. This is the reason for him boating downriver, for working with other rubber barons in the area, and for trying to get to his destination as quickly as possible to claim the rubber trees first, therefore requiring him to move the boat over the isthmus. I would repeat all of that, but it won't make any more sense to you after hearing it a second time either, so let's move on. The film stars Klaus Kalinske, a very well-known German actor. It did star Jason Robards and Mick Jagger, but we'll get to that in a minute. It also stars Claudia Cardinale, legendary Italian actress. Although her part is something that is unnecessary to the overall movie and plot. She could have been removed from the film and trimmed the thing by about 20 minutes. And by the way, unnecessary is a word that has become synonymous with the production of this film. The story itself as a film is unnecessary. The production that occurred over 5 years was unnecessary. The deaths and injuries sustained over the production were unnecessary. The destruction of parts of the rainforest to make the film were unnecessary. Even Werner Herzog himself gave himself the nickname Conquistador of the Unnecessary. Now, here's the plot. So spoiler warning is in effect. Everything I already told you in the plot synopsis earlier happens. But add into it the hiring of about 1,000 native Peruvian indigenous peoples for $2.50 a day to do all of the manual labor, act in the film, and fend off the other tribes looking to attack. The whole boat over the isthmus happens in the second hour of the film. At first, the indigenous people are all in with the idea. When they make their first attempt and one of their own dies in an accident, they all disappear for 2 days, come back, seem more determined to get the boat over the mountain, and then, in the middle of the night, let the riverboat loose into the most dangerous rapids in Peru called the Rapids of Death. In their mind, this will appease the angry spirits of the isthmus that punish them by first killing one of their own, and therefore hopefully save them from future injury. At the time, Fitzcarraldo is drunk and asleep on the boat. Now, he's a manic, oblivious man, and Klaus Kalinske portrays him as someone who may as well be speaking with aliens from outer space, let alone indigenous tribes. He is driven, unmoved by the dangers that he may face, actually dismissive of them. He is solely focused on bringing the opera to the rainforest. Nothing else motivates him. So, as the boat careens off the rocks and cliffsides, Fitzcarraldo and his small crew do their best to survive it. Which they do, and when they reach their destination, he sells the boat, uses the money to hire an opera to appear on the boat as it sails by, everyone cheering him on, and that's it. that's how it ends. I wish there was more to discuss, but the first 60 minutes are so just monotonous, and both in dialogue and action. You could watch Fitzcarraldo from the hour 1 mark and be okay going forward. Again, you can decide if this sounds like a harrowing experience to capture on film or not. For me, I needed 3 cups of coffee and a cold shower to keep myself awake watching it through again for this review. With that, let's get into what really makes Fitzcarraldo infamous: the actual production. Like the movie, I'm unsure where to begin, so let's begin with the first movie. That's right, the first movie. When principal photography began, Jason Robards was to play Fitzcarraldo, Mick Jagger was to play his trusted aide and sidekick. Herzog chose a location in Peru that was occupied, but not owned, by the Agua Runas. Their culture required that you consult with them when entering their territory for anything beyond just travel, and Herzog did not. Therefore, in December of 1979, the Agua Runas attacked the production camp and burned it down. This was after 40% of the film was completed. Because of the other tribes giving Herzog information, he sensed that an attack was imminent and moved most of his people out of the area before it happened. The remaining members fled downstream in dugout canoes waving white flags. During the months before the attack, Herzog and his production were used as a political football by many of the native tribes in the area, some of whom were trying to create a united league, while others were trying to obtain and maintain their land rights from the Peruvian government. Many of the tribes spread rumors in the Peruvian press that Herzog and his crew were there to murder everyone, rip off their faces, and use their fat in airplane production. They were there to violate the women, kidnap the children, and some even went so far as to get photographs of mass graves of other tribal massacres and pass them off as evidence of Herzog's previous crimes. And a lot of the people believed this stuff because it was in the newspaper. But the attack in December 1979 was enough for Herzog to start looking for alternative locations in Peru to shoot. For me, I would have been looking for a different country altogether, but Herzog was a stubborn man, as obsessive about making his film his way as Fitzcarraldo was about bringing the opera to the rainforest. Finding a new location would take him over 6 months to do, severely delaying the film. In the meantime, lead actor Jason Robards contracted dysentery while in the jungle. He went home to recover and his doctor forbade him from returning, so now Herzog would have to start all over again with a new star. In addition to Robards leaving, Mick Jagger also dropped out. He had contractual obligations for a new album and tour with the Rolling Stones. Herzog is notorious for destroying any unused footage from his films, so the only footage that exists of Robards and Jagger is in the documentary Burden of Dreams, which basically documents the production of the film. After Herzog found a new location, he realized that he had missed the rainy season, which was important because he had 3 different boats for different shots, including the hauling up the mountain scene. Without rain, the rivers were not deep enough to get the shots he needed. And in dry season, when you do get a little bit of rain, everything turns to mud, sometimes 4 feet deep that you sink over your knees when trying to walk through it. So the production dragged on, and they found a new tribe of indigenous people to work on the set and act in the film. Still Aguarana, but a different faction. However, there was another tribe, the Amawaka, and they performed a hit and run on the production camp. A man was hit with an arrow in the throat, and his wife in the hip, and twice more in the leg. They survived. There was a doctor and EMT on the production, and they performed emergency surgery in the jungle as Herzog himself illuminated the wounds with his flashlight in one hand, and with the other he sprayed the mosquitoes with a can of repellent. The arrows, when you see them, are about 4 feet long. These were not your Walmart arrows. Things were getting tense. Therefore, every week or so, the Aguarunas would send a patrol upriver to make a show of force and keep the violence at bay. But that was not the only violence Herzog would encounter. During the production, Peru and Ecuador were having a military clash over their shared border. And yes, Herzog's production got too close to that fight and they needed to retreat to safety and regroup. Luckily for Herzog, things began to calm down, and the only problem he was left with were the production problems, which the weather was severely delaying because they needed rain to film in the rivers. As the months and the work dragged on, the tension in the camps became heightened. First, Herzog made 2 separate camps, one for Westerners with Western food and Western culture, the second for the natives where they could have their own culture and not be exposed to what Herzog called the toxicity of Western life. The problem? No women. Most of the extras were men who had left their families. In the native Peruvian culture, masato is an important staple of their diet. It is a fruit that when peeled, boiled, mashed, and fermented becomes a ceremonial drink, essential to everyday life. Only women are allowed to make it. No women, no masato. By the way, masato needs liquid to ferment properly, and the tradition is to start out by having everyone spit into it to get it started. Also, no women, well, men can become a little irritable. Therefore, a visiting Catholic priest from a nearby missionary advised Herzog to provide women to the men so they would not go insane in the jungle. No shit, a Catholic priest was advocating for prostitutes, and Herzog complied. He brought in prostitutes to satisfy the men and keep them happy and get the masato going. Notice I have yet to talk about actually making the movie. Just wanted to throw that out there. Since they were in the middle of the jungle, small prop planes delivered supplies and other things came by way of canoe. 2 planes crashed, deaths occurred, others were paralyzed, production continued. One native lumberjack on set was bitten by a poisonous snake, and to keep the venom from getting to his leg, he used a chainsaw to hack off his own foot. Herzog called it a good choice because he lived. Production continued. The assistant director was injured filming a scene on the boat. His hand was split in half, requiring 8 hours of surgery with no anesthetic, and to keep his screaming down, one of the prostitutes in camp held his head between her bare breasts to comfort him. Production continued. After all that, let's get to moving the boat over a mountain bullshit. After 3 years later, Herzog would prepare to film the central metaphor of his story. A Brazilian engineer was brought in to help design and construct the elaborate pulley and winch system you see in the film. However, he gave only a 30% chance of everyone surviving the stunt because he designed the pulley system for a 20-degree slope. And even though the natives and Herzog use a bulldozer, dynamite, and their bare hands to rip away the rainforest, they left a more dramatic 40-degree slope. As well, the real-life ship, remember, only weighed 30 tons in 1890. Herzog's ship was 350 tons. The engineer gave the odds of the entire system failing and killing about 60 to 100 people at 70%. Herzog went ahead anyway, the engineer quit, and the pulley system did fail, but no one died. There were multiple injuries, but no one died. This was a huge victory for Herzog, as he was able to film the climactic scene. After almost 3.5 years and looking ahead to another year to 2 years of post-production, it must have felt good. Of course, I could be wrong about that, because Herzog himself said he found no happiness in the completion of the film. Mentally, he was mush. When asked about what he would do after the film was complete, he said he should check himself into an insane asylum. My favorite quote, and for me, true sign that the jungle had won, despite completing the film, is from Herzog when speaking about the jungle. He said, "I love the jungle. It's harmonious murder and fornication. The birds don't sing here, they scream in pain." I think it's safe to say that the man was broken at this point. Depending on your source, the budget for the film was either $14 million or $5.5 million. Either way, it did not make its money back at the box office. Fitzcarraldo flopped. Looking back at the film now, watching it over one more time, I have to say, there are moments, fleeting as they are, that are great, but they are so few and far between. And the execution of the film had to have been hampered in the worst ways by the troubled production. Maybe the story was unnecessary to be told. Maybe the money and lives spent on making the film were unnecessary costs for art. Maybe Fitzcarraldo is destined to be the greatest failure of 20th century film. Big budget, epic story, exotic locations, marquee stars, mired in the unnecessary hubris of man trying to insert himself into the most untamed of Mother Nature's domain. Maybe having a little bit of studio control to rein in artists unable to see that they've become their own biggest obstacle is a good thing after all. And that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Have you ever heard of the film? Have you ever seen it? And if you have seen it, do you think it belongs on the list of greatest films ever made? And if you want more retro film reviews, click on the thumbnails at the end of this video for my other offerings. As always, thank you for watching. Remember, I'm still your reluctant gringo and from south of the border. Salud and a huevo.